Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. It is your favorite warlock, practicing necromancer. And today I want to talk to you about the spiritual side of black magic. And I think this is a great topic that a lot of people should really take interest in and get away from the mundane distractions. One of the things that I've noticed on social media is the fads that are going around. People has an opinions. Opinions are like assholes. Everyone has one. So I constantly tell an apprentice of mine, don't argue with sheep. Why? Because they have no interest in learning. They have no interest in growing or getting past the mundane physical things such as Christianity. Modern Christianity, for an example, has become more politicalized. They've become more, how should I say this, greedy when it comes to money, and it's always about power. Who's dominant and who's not, and they act like children when they don't get their own way. So, Courtney Anderson, welcome to the channel. So, um, one of the things that I've been doing over the last couple of months is I've been delving into the Necronomicon as a practicing necromancer and really working with the alchemist, the pharaoh, the black pharaoh, and I've been working a lot with the magician himself, Nyarlathotep, and I really like working with Cthulhu because he really is the dreamer. He's the sleeper. And when it comes to chaos, there's no one better that does it than this outer god. So the best one to work with would be the Necronomicon by Simon. But you can also get into H.P. Lovecraft's work. You can get into Donald Tyson's work when you come to that. And the reason I say this is because even if you get into Satanism, you got those who believe that the Sith was an actual religion. I don't know who started that back in 2005, and nor do I freaking care, but the Satanic Temple actually uses the same publishing company as the ones that put these books out. But it's interesting to see how religions have become more physical and less spiritual. It's always about money, even though they claim to be non-profit. They have creeds, but they don't follow them. And I've always said that if you're going to preach something, always back it up with numerous sources. You guys know this about me. But I've also said that you need to make yourself available to the public. That's something else you know about me. So, a lot of people don't educate. They just put out books because it's the latest fad. And when it comes to religions, it's who's right and who's wrong, and it's closed-mindedness. There's no possibility that they could be wrong and that you may be right. And it comes down to the brainwashing techniques that is used. And when we talk about Satanism, for an example, as I've said in last, couple of videos of the past, Vokalakis Oriax really cut through the bullshit in his book, the Book of the Divine Black Flame of Satan. When he says, if there's 7 billion Satans in the world, how does that make sense if you're going to be calling on Satan himself? But more to the fact that if you are your own God, if you are Satan, then why would you be calling on the powers of Satan, his demons in the underworld, and have them bestow the power upon you? Shouldn't you already have that power? You know what I'm saying? It's that hypocrisy. So, certain organizations just regurgitate materials without getting into the actual knowledge. And when it comes to the goetic demons, they really don't take them back to the earliest sources and find out where, these spirits are coming from and how they can help you. For an example, if you look at your day demon versus your nighttime demon, for an example, Phoenix is my night demon. Okay, he's my spiritual guide at night. And during the day, I have Baal, which is a Canaanite god. Okay, so you have a Mesopotamian belief system of the phoenix rising from its own ashes. The wings, the chimera effect, the whole king caboodle, watching, shining the light throughout the night. And then you have the day, which is a Canaanite god, for meaning Lord, during the day. Throughout the 12 zodiacs, or what used to be known as the 13 zodiacs, the shaman with the serpent, which was the 13th, and it takes place late September, early November. These things will, this one here literally clarifies the outer reaches of chaos and discipline, chaos and order, the balance factor. And I really liked to see that, because when you get serious about your practices, you're going to realize that no matter what region you are in, you're going to see combinations of commonalities, but also subtle differences. And so, like I said, the Necronomicon. So let me talk about this for a little bit here. The earliest manifestation of the Necronomicon was by H.P. Lovecraft, and this is what most people know. And he's become known as a fictional writer and author, and he's written a few books. But it was more about how he disappeared, and a bunch of blood and guts was the only thing remaining after horrified screaming took place in a closed den in his mansion. Even though his work really describes him hearing voices, communicating with the spirits, communicating with these old gods, these eldritch terrors, if you will. And he breaks them down in a story depicting on, their realm, how they were seen, what they were capable of. Does this not ring a bell with the goetic demons of the Clavicle of Solomon? How about the constitution of Pope Honorius with a hierarchy? 4 inner gods, you got outer gods, you got those that serve other gods, and so forth. And then you have those that really clarify, this is what we can do for you. Okay? So a lot of people, when they get into things like the Necronomicon, they go for Simon's work, but they don't really get into the actual spiritualism. It's more the physical, ritualistic perspective. So by the time you get into the Necronomicon, then you realize, wait, there was an original copy that is somewhere out there, most likely with the Vatican, in their underground libraries where nobody can fucking get to them, or it's in a museum someplace under lock and key and guards. Maybe a private book collector, who knows? And it's called the El Zahif. Oh my God, I can't speak today. Need more coffee. The El Azif. And it was put forth by the Mad Arab. So by the time Simon got his book out, he really did it from a ceremonial perspective, and I really liked seeing that. Now, when it came to calling on the old gods, you're dealing with the planetary spirits, you're dealing with the symbols or the alchemical symbols for the planetary figures. You're dealing with the depictions of those spirits. the time of the day and night that you can call upon them, but you've also got to see if they're male or female aspects, which is kind of cool. So he didn't just put the gateways in the square, the magical squares into play here, which you'll find in things like the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage, or the Magus even, perhaps something out of Crowley's work. You'll see a lot of other things that go into play, like numerology. You'll see planetary figures. You'll see the old names like Inanna, Nibiros, the father of the moon, the sun god, and so forth. And these go back centuries, so it's nothing new, right? So then comes along an author, that is called Donald Tyson, and he actually takes it from a sci-fi perspective, and he makes it into a few good books, which I do recommend, by the way, because when you get into his grimoire and you get into the 13 gates of the Necronomicon, for an example, then you realize you got different types of species that supposedly came to Earth. Okay? Now, here's the kicker. He didn't just put in the gates as portals, which go along with certain locations around the world, such as Egypt or Brazil, just to name a couple. But he also described the incantations to bring forth these old ones. Okay? But Simon's Necronomicon, however, sticks close to the old world. When he speaks of the Black Earth, he's talking about Egypt. Wow, amazing, right? Which is why I also recommend the Egyptian Book of the Dead to you if you're going to get into the Necronomicon. Now, the ironic part about the Egyptian Book of the Dead is during the first, second, and third dynasty of Egypt, you have what is called the Shem priesthood, which ironically is around the same time as the Order of the Black Robes, which was in European tradition. Okay? And if you follow the locations worldwide, you have what is known as 15 Devil's Gates throughout the world. These are triangular locations throughout the world and can be highly explosive, from what I understand. Apparently, scientists tried some kind of magnetic thing that blew up one of them, and it was like an atomic bomb or something. Not sure if it was true. It took place over in the Middle East somewhere. That's all I know. And there was a video on YouTube that actually spoke about it, but like I said, you need more than one thing to back that up. So, anyways, when you get into the rituals, such as the Green Emerald of Thoth, the Book of Thoth, for an example, put forth by Aleister Crowley, you'll notice that it speaks on rituals. It'll speak on languages. The Egyptian Book of the Dead, during the first, second, and third dynasty, the Shem priesthood were responsible for any magical operations. This means funerary. This means spiritual work. This means being an intermediary between the gods and the public. So, and then you have, like I said, different levels of the priesthood that really have their own responsibilities within their temple, their mosque, their church, and so forth. So when you get into the Necronomicon, just in this case, you'll notice the time that the mad Arab departed from his village was the time of Aquarius. And this started out in January, roughly around the 15th area, when Venus disappeared. His route was depicted between page 7 and 12 in the Necronomicon by Simon, depicting his entire journey from start to finish when he ended up in Babylonia. He went through Mesopotamia all the way up into what is now known as Gaelic territory, which is kind of cool. Scandinavian even. So you got all these different territories where the Necronomicon started and ended. I mean, hell, even in Russia, there's actually a forest and a lake where it's said to have a city of the dead under this lake, and it calls to people. You got a forest where the old gods literally call to people, and people have gone missing because of this. And this is stuff that you can see right here on YouTube. There's I don't know how many videos just on the Necronomicon alone. But in this case, you're noticing the time of Venus, meaning the planet Venus, which is why I said planetary figures, and the routes of the astronomy. You know, about the 15th of January, it disappears and it comes back around the 15th, 19th of February. During this time, it is known as the time of chaos, disaster, warfare, political upheaval, and destruction. I mean, hell, even today we look around the world. When is the greatest events happening? You know, it's right there during this freaking time. So he doesn't just go into alchemical symbols. He doesn't just go into the ceremonial. He doesn't just go into the rituals. He doesn't just call on the spirits. He literally is telling you, hey, there's something here. And when you get into Simon's other works, like the names, the dead names, or the gates, you're seeing things like the Leviathan's belt or Orion's belt, the gate of Leviathan, which goes along with books like, with works like Dante's Inferno. Abandon hope, all ye who enter here, so to speak. So, but when you get into alchemy and you get into herbalism and you get into rituals and ceremonies, you look at the procedures of how these monks did and worshipped their gods. Look at the cult of Anubis, the cult of Artemis, the cult of Hades, the cult of Isis, and the Virgin cult, and stuff like that. Even the oracle of for an example, you see where they had a priesthood and followers, and how they had specific, rites and rituals that they performed, and beings that they called upon. Even in the old world, they went up to the oracles, they went up against the fates, and they inquired with offerings, sacrifices, But it was more about the spiritual aspect, which is why I also recommend the Tibetan Book of the Dead to you. Because when you get into soul searching and you get into the journeying of the soul, and let's say, for an example, you want to get into necromancy, necromancia, getting into the spiritual nexus is perhaps one of the things that attracts most people to the forces of Gehenna, and people, even in Christianity, they don't have an understanding of, there are two different types of things. You have, in Christianity, you have what is known as a prison, and then you have a jail. Two separate things. This is why in certain aspects of the Bible, you have what is known as hellfire and brimstone, and then, which is a location, and then you have what is known as Gehenna. But then when you get into things like, let's go with Catholicism for an example, then you got three locations. You got heaven, hell, and purgatory. You go into Buddhism, say Asian Buddhism, and you got various different types of hells. You got the spiritual realm. So you have hell, which is also a goddess and a location. It's the land of the dead in Nordic mythology. You go into Greek mythology, for an example, and you got Homer's Odyssey, where certain necromantic rituals were done in front of the sirens, just so he'd be able to go home. But he had to learn necromancy, and he had to go into the underworld. And the story goes that he stood between two realms in a rift, and he could communicate with both. Okay? But he came back with certain knowledge that the church had deemed unnatural, unknowable. Okay? But again, we're also talking about an organization that has gone from spiritualism and hardcore zealotry into psychological warfare. Okay, so now it's more all about psychological degrees, not possession, not spirit soul searching, not soul journeying, not spirit, ghost walking or any of this type of stuff, type of practices, but more psychological, meaning you're either crazy like a schizophrenic, or you got bipolar, or you just been using drugs, which is a false persona of the mind. Okay, so either way, you're fucking crazy in their eyes. So, but in the old ways, you look at the practices, they use different tools, such as a basin, full of water. You got, excuse me, you have the black obsidian mirror, the scrying mirror. You got pendulums, and then you got cartomancy, the spirit boards, and so forth. But they forget about the old practices such as necromancia, geomancy, aeromancy, hydromancy, pyromancy, chiromancy, and spatulomancy. And like I said before, there's 36 different types of mancies, and the Catholics only condemn 7 of them. 7 out of 36. Most people don't even know about these other types of mancies because it's all regurgitated in reverse psychology. It's reverse Christianity. And they don't get into the old ways of practicing, such as learning about death, learning about dying, learning about the soul's journey from the time you're born to the time you die. What transpires during the time you're alive in this realm, this living realm, this physical manifestation, this prison, this scion, if you will. So the Tibetan Book of the Dead will show you, and help you study the soul's journey throughout life and death. And you'll realize that death is only the beginning. There's a whole nother world out there. And when you get into spiritualism and you start working with the various different types of entities, such as demons, jinn, orisha, loa, demons, the Devi even, then you're going to realize, wow, you have all these other dimensions, all these other realms, all these other planes of existence that we can travel to when you unlock your own potential, which has been, well, taken from you. I mean, think about it like this. The serpent, okay? Why did it take us, the serpent, to enlighten humanity? Okay, I want you to think about this. Okay, Adam was so haughty and so hardcore that he believed the lies given to him by the false god Jehovah. Okay, my cats have the zoomies. It's like 2 fluff balls zooming past. But anyways, you have Adam, who was this hardcore zealot that would not go against what he was told. He was ignorant. He was set in his ways, believing what he was told, taken at face value. So when Eve was born or created, why was it that she was the only one willing to take that step and eat of the forbidden fruit? When your God tells you, you can have anything here, just don't touch that tree. What is it about that tree that he's preventing you from understanding? What is it about that tree and the reason why he refuses to have you do it or partake of it? Think about it this way. If I offer her an apple, what can she do but to take it? That's a woman's sin right there, the curiosity. Okay? The curiosity. That was the woman's sin. And so when the serpent went in and said, hey, you will not die, but you will surely live, You got to go back into the first, second, and third chapters of the Bible, the book of Genesis. Okay? So the first chapter, verses 26 and 27, shows where man and women were made in his image. This is the spiritual application, right? So then you have the second application, which is chapter 2, verses 16 and 17. Okay? So now they've been made manifest, corporeal, right? So why would he need to put Adam to sleep in chapter 3 and remove a rib just to make a woman again? Unless the first woman wasn't Eve, but in fact Lilith, the first feminine archetype. Wow. Interesting how that works, right? But yet, you see the spiritualness, applications of this, right there alone. You had to be created in the spirit. You had to be manifested in the spirit before you can be manifested in the physical. So by the time you get into rituals and you get into ceremonies, and you're exploring all these magical studies, such as alchemy, such as astronomy, numerology, let's say spellcasting, as it's referred to today. How about making powders, elixirs, oleums, going into spiritual summonings, evocation and invocations, spiritual communions? Why is it that you have to be the one to get into these works, learn these works, and open those portals and invite them in? You invite them in, which means you have to go into the spirit just to see them, to commune with them. However, now you have what the Catholics refer to as possession, right? And people claim that the demonic possessions have been around for centuries, okay? Even before them. Now, we know that through world history and mythology, through theurgy of spiritual evolution, that both baneful and beneficial spirits have been around for hundreds of thousands of years, long before the Christian, practices were even a concept in its mama's womb. Wow, okay. Let's take the Devi or the Jinn. They're not considered to be good or evil, but beings that bring a lesson to the individual. Wow, interesting how that works, right? So then we go into the Greek and we see where angels and demons are separated from the daemon to the coco-daemon. Wow, okay. So how do you achieve apotheosis? Apotheosis is the evolution into godhood, much like the gnosis of microcosm and the macrocosm. Wow, okay. So let's take it further. What is your soul? And how do you go into the spirit? Is the soul and the spirit the same thing? Or is it divided from the body? Meaning there's three different aspects: body, mind, and, soul, or spirit, as Andrew Womack would put it in his book. Okay? So if the physical construct can't leave this world, but be turned back to dust, because it came from dust, wow, okay? So that means your consciousness would be the mind. So then you have to master the mind. Now, how do you do that? Through meditation, through void workings, through practicing things like remote viewing, projection, and astral projection. Then you get into ghost walking, soul, spiritual journey, astral projection practices. Okay. So that would separate the soul from the mind or the consciousness, which again would separate you from the body. So you're seeing the transgression of the soul through growth, through maturity. going from a newborn baby to adulthood. Okay? An apprentice to a master. Wow, okay. So the Tibetan Book of the Dead takes it further. We know that in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, it shows the ceremonies and the rites, such as organ removing, which would be autopsies today. We see where the cleansings of the body, the washing of the body, would be done by either the mortician or the funeral home to prepare the body for the wake. Okay? We also see where they do what is called mummification, and they utilize herbs, they utilize certain oils to preserve the corpse, the body. Okay, this is called the cadaver, the lick, okay, or the glick, depending if you're going from European to Germanic to Slavic traditions of necromancy. Okay, so this is just in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. So by the time you get into the Tibetan Book of the Dead, you're looking at the complete study of death and dying. The dying and death procedures, the psychological perspectives. You're seeing how the spirit and the consciousness work together within the body, coming to terms with that aspect, and then realizing that death is just the beginning. Now, I find it interesting through personal studies and personal experience where when people die, just a few days prior to their death, I had this guy that I knew. I grew up. He was dating my mother, and he died of cancer. About 3 days before he died, he wouldn't stay in bed. He refused to ask for help. He could barely stand, which meant that when he stood up, he just fell right down. But he was so energetic and persistent. He kept saying, "They're coming for me. They're coming for me. They're coming for me." And you'd ask, who? Who's coming for you? My ancestors. My ancestors are coming for me. So that tells you, okay, that makes reality that there's other planes of existence. The Tibetan Book of the Dead speaks on this. The Egyptians believed that there was a realm of the dead, there was a realm of life, and that there was a way to go from life to death and return. Just like in Homer's Odyssey, just like in the various levels of the underworld, according to Dante's Inferno. Then you get into things like Paradise Lost, and then you're going to see all these beings that have so much that they can offer you through knowledge and wisdom if you seek them out. But again, you got to be open-minded. You got to have that reality of going, I'm going to remain humble. I'm willing to submit and say, hey, take me on as an apprentice. Teach me so that I can learn how to do this myself. Wow. Okay? But the thing that stops people is they make the mistake of validation. Now, what do I mean by validation? Validation means that you are seeking validation from others. This is what prevents you from growing. This is what prevents you from evolving. Because everything you do, you're putting all over social media. You're going into Facebook groups. You're going into TikTok. You're going into YouTube, and you're splashing it all around, asking questions. What do you recommend for this? Hey, what do you recommend for this? How should I be able to do this? And they'll say, oh, don't do it. It's not going to benefit you. Wow, really? That's called envious. That's called slavehood. That's called hypocrites because they themselves are too afraid to get off their ass and do it themselves. Which is why I recommend the subtle art of not giving a fuck. Okay? And I actually marked a page here. I want you to think about something, and this is basically psychological. Okay. And let me see here. I think it's on this page here because there's two different pages here. You know, Mark Manson, the illustrates this illustrates the first subtlety of not giving a fuck. When we say damn, watch out, Mark Manson just don't give a fuck. We don't mean Mark doesn't care about anything. On the contrary, we mean that Mark Manson doesn't care about adversity in the face of his goals. He doesn't care about pissing some people off or do what he feels is right or important or noble. Okay, which I thought that was very well, worded and put forth well. Okay, but then we go, over to the next page, page 17, and we see a little. Wait, was it? Let me see here. I think I went past it a little bit here. Yeah, I think I did go past it. Give me a sec here. I got to locate it. I went to the wrong page here on this. Here it is. So you got George Orwell. Okay. I actually ordered one of his books from the 1880s. Can't wait till that gets in here. But he said that to see what's in front of one's nose requires constant struggle. I want you to think about this. When you have something in front of you, why is it so hard for you to see it? Why is it so hard for you to consider it? We have so many distractions in this world that limit you from the spiritual applications, from your studies, your practices, bettering your life, right? So why is it so hard for you to see it? It's a constant struggle. You want to see it, and then you kick yourself in the ass because it was right in front of you the whole fucking time. When you finally, years down the road, say days, months, years, down the road, all of a sudden it's like, wait, that was right in front of my face back then. Why didn't I see it, right? But then you have a saying, and I want to read this to you. That says the desire for more positive experience is itself a negative experience, and paradoxically, the acceptance of one's negative experience is in itself a positive experience. Wow. Think about that for just a minute. Okay, just think about that for just a minute. That is perhaps a fucked up way of seeing it, right? Well, think about it. When you are pursuing your goals as a spiritualist, what do you expect from your practice? Why are you getting into that practice? What was it that grabbed your attention about it? You know what I'm saying? So if you're so focused on busting that door open to get that goal, then it becomes a negative because you'll never get there. You're so focused on that one end goal, that one end game, that you fail to notice the steps that will positively get you there better. So have you ever noticed that when you aren't looking for something, you find it? You know what I'm saying? When you are not going for a position, I'm going to give you an example. I spent years trying to move up in a company. Okay? Never happened. It never fucking happened. So what I did was I turned to the spirits and I petitioned them. I gave them offerings. I gave them my sacrifice. And I petitioned them to open the doors for me to do this. And I talked to them like you and I are talking right now. And over the next 4 months, I noticed so many people just get up and get done. They promoted shift leader after shift leader after shift leader. They kept leaving. And then you had that opportunity to be a closer. And then you become a dietary aid. Then you go back to that company, and all of a sudden, after a year, bam, you're a shift leader. You may not have the numbers or the title anymore, but you are expected to do that shift leader position because you have the knowledge. Companies do weird things. Corporations do weird things. Apparently, even as a part-time employee, it would damage the company if you were given that fucking title. You know, it's like, really? Yeah. But you see the point. Because I went the opposite direction, I petitioned the spirits, and then I just did the job. I focused on the job at hand. Those doors opened. It wasn't the way I thought it would open, but it opened, and I was able to become a shift lead. Wow. So that saying about a positive becoming a negative and a negative becoming a positive really fits it. And when you go back over your study, your practices, your notes, your titles, everything that you developed over a number of years, and you realize, wait, this was underneath my nose 5 years ago, 8 years ago. Why did I not do this years ago, before this? Then you kick yourself in the ass, right? So when you get into things like the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Necronomicon, you're not just learning from these beings, these gods. You're not just learning from their subordinates, if you will, their lieutenants, their commanders, their legionnaires, if you will. You're learning to open up these portals. You're learning to soul journey into other planes of existence, other dimensions, other multiversal realms. You're learning magic and sorceries and techniques from these beings that are from other realms, that is no longer here in this realm. This is why when they preach on demonic possession, they look for certain identifying markers, such as superhuman strength, being able to walk through fire without being burned. How about knowledge of languages you've never studied? So they developed a system of spiritual takeover, but they always fail to identify the last one, which is the willing possession. Now, what is an evocator of souls but somebody who invokes spirits into themselves? Somebody who works with spirits that they call upon. So the willing possession of those spirits have been seen in Sufism. They've been seen in various different religions that go back centuries, even millennia, before Christian, Hebrewism, Catholicism, Judaism, and Islam. These people claim to be the dominant religion, but they know nothing about spirituality today. Most people have never even experienced a spiritual encounter. Have you ever been hit in the face by a baseball bat and you see that flashing white light? But yet, ironically, there's no concussion. There's no broken bones, just blood coming from the nose. How about going 2,995 miles with no brakes, and yet you arrive unharmed? Could that be your spiritual guide, your guardian? Every human has a guardian demon. The Native Americans have a saying: you have a white wolf and a black wolf that pull and play tug of war with your soul. The question of the story is, well, who wins? And the elder would tell you, whichever one you feed. That should tell you something right there. And like I said, with the jinn, you have those that are beneficial and those that are baneful. But they all bring lessons to you. The magi is a seeker of truth, a seeker of knowledge. This is why Jesus Christ, for an example, was put to death, because he sought knowledge. He became a true magi. And he was put to death for his beliefs, for his studies, because people cannot handle knowledge. They cannot handle the truth. They want to accept established norms, and they want to be a part of something. They want a place to belong. And then when somebody comes around that actually has that knowledge, they become fearful. They shun you. They become the outlaw, the bad guy, the devil worshiper, the hated, the shunned. Why? Because these people are sheep. Best way I can put it to you. But I want you to consider that if you're going to get into things like necromancy, you're going to get into demonolatry, such as Satanism. You're going to get into working with say, for an example, the Loa or the Orisha. Hell, even if you get into ancestral magics and you want to work with the dead alone, or become a demonolator and work solely with demons. Maybe you're into Hinduism and you're working with their system of deities. Either way, you want to be able to identify the current. You want to be able to connect to the particular being and entity that you're going to work with. And then you want to be able to call them forth respectively, without circles of protection, even though they're called circles of empowerment. Even if you get into the old world, the Renaissance or the Dark Ages perspective of the triangle of evocation and the circle of empowerment, for an example, then you will see how these symbols represent power. The vortex in a ritual system that calls forth spirits. Look at the rituals in any religion and you will see it. In my last video, somebody asked me about this symbol. Okay? About this symbol. Look at it in the same manner. Each point is not just an element, but a pillar of knowledge. If you look at Miyamoto Musashi's The Book of the Five Rings, each element is a level of knowledge and self-mastery that allows you to grow, to mature. Look at it as going from a samurai to a ronin, to the path of solitary confinement. An elder of mine once said that there are those that have become so transformed that they don't even need the world anymore. They've resided beyond it. They don't associate with the world because of how far outside of that system that they are. They've transformed themselves that much, and they've developed abilities that freak people out. They've developed, powerful abilities that separate them in what today would be classified as a mutation. Okay? Look at the best example of this would be, Mutant X. Okay? What the normal people versus witches and warlocks, if you will. What happens when you delve into that knowledge and that spiritual nexus and you begin to practice, you begin to take on those characteristics, you begin to transform yourself into something more, because you're associating with the dead, you're associating with spirits through these rituals and these rites. People become envious, they become jealous, and they become spiteful and hateful. This is why you end up alone. This is why you become shunned. This is why you become hated. This is why the Shem priesthood would sometimes be run out of town. This is why the monks, such as Tibetan monks or Shaolin monks, remain in a sanctuary, a temple, and they practice. Look at the in Buddhism, or Hinduism, I should say, you have those that go into extreme rituals and rites, such as extreme solitary, extreme fasting, extreme prayer. They'll go into a cave system and come out months later. And they do this through fasting, meditation, spiritual worship, and the likes. They've transformed themselves into such zealotry, zealots, that they're separate. They're separate. They've divided themselves from humanity. They become something more. And because of that, people fear them. Look at those, for out of an example, and let's go back and let's go with the Black Plague or the Spanish influenza. Those who were what we call the coroner or the EMTs, those who deal with death are considered to be dead already. Therefore, people will shun them. If you go to somebody's home and you remove a corpse, you're contaminated. People fear you because of that. This is why those that work in the morgue or those that work in the funeral home are always alone. This is why necromancers are associated with the gravedigger, the mortician, the funeral home, personnel, the coroner. This is why necromancy is feared, because they're connected to the Da'ath energy. Any kind of practitioner, no matter what the system is, that works with these beings is going to be feared because of this. You're contaminated and not associated with the modern fad. So many people are, like I said, are so involved in trying to be a part of something or connected to something, they fail to do the work. They expect to get in and go, oh, well, I've been baptized, and guess what? I'm now a saint. No, you're just an apprentice. You're a student of that religion. You go into Satanism and you read a book, you're not a Lord of Darkness. You become an adept, an acolyte, a neophyte. Now you got a whole nother set of challenge. You see what I'm saying? There's a difference between the world and practitioners. The world looks at the physical. A practitioner looks at the spiritual. Those like shamans or necromancers walk between both worlds. Ironic how that works, right? So even working with the Necronomicon, you're going to learn the old ways. You're going to learn the old ways. And like I said, down in the description box, I actually wrote these books that I just showed here today. And I wanted to put this out there because I want you to realize that TV and social media is nothing more than a distraction. Okay? Look at how many ads. T-Bones, chill the fluff out. Don't you get mouthy with me. I will fluff that belly up, mister. My male cat is gone schizo over there, spazzing out like crazy. Like I said, the zoomies. So, anyways, like I said, so if you look at ads in today's society, if you're watching a video on YouTube, say, let's go with the Necronomicon or the Rod Skinner, how about Satanism? You're going to see 95% of these videos as reverse Christians going, well, I used to do this, I used to do that, but they had no knowledge behind their claims. They can't even tell you what the symbols are. They can't even tell you what the practices were, what the procedures were, what the creeds were of the religions that they claim to have been a part of. And then you got those other, 4% of videos that are so full of ads. It's it's basically psychology on a subliminal, perspective of you must have. You need to go out and get this latest purse. You need to go out and get this latest set of shoes. You need to go out and get this latest tool. And one of the big ones that I focused on, and I've actually posted on this on TikTok, is this. They got this new tool out there for brake changes, brake jobs for your car. And I said, technically, all you need is either a pair of vice grips, such as a plumber's pair of vice grips, or a C-clamp, and an old brake pad to push the piston into the caliper. Wow. So why would I want to spend $15 when I've already got these tools in my toolkit? Wow. Okay. You can go right ahead and you do that. But you're wasting funds. You're wasting money that you could be using for something else. The latest iPhone, the latest whatever. Think about 20, 30 years ago. We already have this in stock in our own possessions that we already own. Why would we want to upgrade to the same thing? Just saying, right? So if you're going to take a religion and you're going to start a temple, you're going to start a series on something, why would you take it from just one religious practice? Why would you believe that one source over any other? I've always told you guys, if it doesn't align with archaeological, historical, folklore, or mythology, how about anthropology perspectives of cultural and how they lived and what tools they used and all this other stuff, not just socialism, and the monetary payment issues, why would you believe it? If it doesn't align, get the fuck rid of it. It is most likely a trick. It is most likely something that has been added in to distract you. Like watching a video and all of a sudden an ad comes up telling you, you need this, you need that. And right now it's on discount. I want you to go underneath your, I want you to look at something. Okay. I want you to go underneath Amazon, just as an example. And I want you to pick a book, any book. I don't give a shit what book it is or what the title is. And then I want you to go down into the new and used portion of that book. Okay. This is third-party sellers. Okay. That have this book for cheaper, right? Now I want you to look at the shipping and handling fee. Either way, you're still paying full price for it. They're going to get that original $14.99 out of you. If not, try to get a little bit extra. So by buying a brand new book, you're still going to get the taxation on it, right? Now, what makes you think that the same isn't done within religious practice? You're born into a religion, you don't get a chance to explore others. You get into a tradition, you dabble in it, you're not going to get the benefits. But if you become an adept in that tradition, you apply yourself through dedication, commitment, disciplined focus and self-motivation, and apply yourself within ritualistic, ceremonial perspectives of rites and practices, learning the tools, learning various different methods of spiritual summonings, and identifying various different types of beings within that current, noticing that they're different personalities. They're not one, but many. Okay. Learning to identify the current itself. Let's say, for an example, you're working with, let's go with the dead. It's kind of a neon green, right? But if you're working with the hollow, for an example, this is more bleak, it's more gray. But let's say, for an example, if you're working with psionics, then it would be pure white energy. If you're working with crimson, then it would be, demonic would be red. So you got the demonic, and then you got the archdevils. Okay? So you got two different energy colors that you can attach to, you can work with. Where do you think this comes from? Where do you think this comes from? Old school practices. So why would you believe a corrupted, watered down system? Why would you believe what's being put forth out there today? I see a bunch of people going towards one direction. I'm going to go the opposite. Why? Because I would rather get to the truth. I would rather fulfill my legacy as a mage and go with the truth, with true enlightenment. Now, what is apotheosis? Self-mastery, self-evolution, through knowledge, wisdom, growth, connecting to these beings, collecting, and working with them as equals, not as subservients, but as equals, master and apprentice. You want to grow, you want to mature in these traditions, then you must apply yourself. But you got to understand the spiritual connection to the physical. It's not just mental, it's not just physical, it's also spiritual. There is a reason why the triquetra, or the trinity, if you will, is always of three. Okay? In some rituals, in some ceremonies, you need at least 4 dependents. You need the priest or priestess, you need the deacon, you need the celebrant, and then you have the congregation. Wow. Ironic how this happens, right? So I just walked you through spiritualism, mentalism, the spiritual. Wow. Amazing, right? Now think about that. I want you to earnestly think about that. I want you to go in, meditate, and really reflect not only on yourself and what you expect from your religion, but also what you expect to get out of it. Why did you become attracted to it? Why did you get into it? What do you expect from it? Why are you working with certain types of entities? Why are you calling on them through rituals, through elementals, through the symbols of your religion? What's the commonalities and what's the differences? No matter how subtle or in your face. Interesting, isn't it? But that's what I recommend for you. Okay? I want you to do this for you, not for me, not for your neighbor, not for your community. Fuck all that shit. Do it for you. Because you want to do it. Because you want to grow. This is why I've always preached, whatever you preach, back it up with numerous sources and references, and always make yourself available to the public. You're responsible for your own choices, your own failures, your own successes, and you need to take note of that. How can you change those losses or those failures and make them into wins? That's what you got to sit there and reflect on. So, with that said, I want to thank everybody for jumping on here with me. I want to thank Courtney Anderson for jumping on here with me. Hilo for jumping on here. Itchy Fingers, welcome back, by the way. And Leo, welcome back, brother. For those of you who are going to jump on after this, feel free to hit that subscribe button. Feel free to hit that notification button so you won't miss the next time I'm on. From what I understand, it helps the ones and zeros, if you will. Personally, I don't care about that. I just do what I do as a living grimoire to help you guys out so you can grow and mature in your own religions. Maybe cut a few corners so you don't have to work as hard. So, well, Norway, wow, you're really far away. I'm from the U.S., so United States. Right now, it's roughly about 25 degrees, I think, last time I looked. We had our first official snowstorm yesterday, so it was kind of cool to see, today. Not yesterday, the day before and throughout the night. So we had to spend most of yesterday cleaning up all that white fluff we call snow. Love it. Try doing that with one hand out of commission. So luckily the maintenance guy was out there with a snowblower and he finished up my parking spot for me. But it's all good. But yeah. And then I spent last night with my son. So, hey, it works out. But like I said, do this for you because you want to do it, not for somebody else. You want to go into the spiritual, get into it. Go into the various grimoires, such as Black Magic and Pacts, by White. Get into the old grimoires like the Grand Grimoire, Red Dragon, Black Dragon even. Get into the Black Raven. Learn about the different types of rituals and the different types of beings that you can call forth. Get into the, the Infernal Dictionary, if you will. Get into all these other works such as Dante's Inferno, the poetical texts. You get into the Zohar, the Jewish Haggadah. Get into the Talmud, the Book of Tobit. Get into the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Scroll of Amran, for an example. Get into your actual religious rites and go into these old works, and I guarantee it, you're going to see a huge difference. So, but again, it's up to you. Apply. Don't apply, your choice. All right. So for now, have a good day or a good night wherever you are in the world. And like I said, Starfire81, welcome to the channel. Glad to have you here. Appreciate you. And until next time, I'm out.